Hit the like button if you enjoy the video, and subscribe to never miss a tale of the unknown. Welcome, brave souls, to our Chamber of Horrors. Tonight, we peel back the veil of the mundane to reveal the macabre tapestry woven from the darkest corners of the human psyche. 5 tales await, each a twisted labyrinth of fear designed to chill your bones and haunt your dreams. As the shadows gather and the night deepens, remember, there's no turning back now. You're about to enter a realm where the line between the living and the dead blurs, where nightmares become reality. Are you ready to face the unknown? Then let us begin. Cryptic Chronicles presents Peekaboo. Centuries ago, there was a demon named Peekaboo. It was a nasty thing, neither male nor female, hatched from a dead volcano in pre-Inca South America. What was overwhelmingly known about this unholy creature was how it reveled in shock. It fed on it, the kind of shock that bypassed fear and dread and instead struck with an immediate and pure terror. Tales tell that Peekaboo had scaly pale hands which were riveted to its face by rows of iron nails. These ghastly hands obscured any skin, eyes, nose, or mouth underneath, if those were even there, for no one has seen the face of Peekaboo. Or accurately, no one has survived seeing the face of Peekaboo. What Peekaboo did is wait. It would wait for hours, days, even weeks for its victim, crouching near a road or a home, shivering in day or night, with those foul hands over its face. Undoubtedly, someone would approach. It could be a passing tradesman, a group of soldiers, a parent, a wandering child, anyone who showed concern or curiosity. It knows we are empathetic beings drawn to a person, someone sitting silently with their hands over their face, particularly if that someone seems pale, feeble, or needy. We need to see what is underneath. It is the face that draws us, that guides us. The face previews the soul of a thing, and Peekaboo knows this about us. When we approach, it strikes, ripping its hands from its face, popping bloodied nails from skull and skin, and revealing its soul. That soul, that face, that horrific image stops blood, ruptures a heart, and kills in an instant. For centuries, its horrors were blamed on disease and the natural course of time and of things beyond human control. An old man's heart gave out, a soldier discovered dead, a mother succumbed to illness, a child never woke from a dream, an infant dead in its crib. These were its conquests, its meals. Legend tells that a tribe of Brujas, or Incan witches, finally captured Peekaboo in a golden maze of knotted ropes called a quipo, sealing it in an unmapped cave near a rocky coast of central Mexico. Tales tell of it struggling for centuries, wriggling for escape, but never dying. And there it remains, hands affixed to its vile face, hammered there by an unknown and unending evil. As time passed and generations faded, the legend of this demon contorted decade by decade to the lie it is today. Mothers and fathers tend to their children with a game now, the pastime of peekaboo, popping from a hiding place, stepping from a shadow, or leaning over a crib to simply cover their face and, with a smile, reveal what is hidden underneath. Peekaboo, the grins, the laughter, the innocence of it all betrays Peekaboo again and again. It knows. It feels the twist of its black legend, and a deep dark anger shakes those embedded nails and tugs at skin, desperate to wrench those hands away, reveal its rage, and feed. Legend says that each time we play his game, play Peekaboo, we test its legacy, and the quipo imprisoning Peekaboo stretches and frays, inching his horror closer to freedom. This same legend says that should one of us deem to imitate Peekaboo and amuse themselves by playing Peekaboo his game with 100 people in one lifetime, whether we know we have or haven't, Peekaboo will feel it. It will feel you are mocking it and challenging it, and it will target the foolish vanity that drives you to mimic its legacy. It knows it cannot leave its prison, but generations of witches hint it may be able to send its face in place of yours. And when you smile at your friend, your brother or your sister, your child, or your baby, when you reach up and cover your face with your hands and gently whisper peekaboo, in that instant, it will have found you. And when you lift your hands away, the face you show, the soul you reveal to your loved one, may not be your own. So ask yourself, how many times have you played peekaboo? I trust you found the first tale to your liking, a mere whisper in the night. Now brace yourself. The next story escalates the horror. Presenting Red. Ruby, crimson, scarlet. The color of fire, of passion, of pain. Red. How I love it. It was beautiful. The boldness, the warmth of the color stirred something deep inside me. It whispered to the very core of my being. Dark, seductive. Velvet promises of unrivaled pain and pleasure. It made me feel alive, but it was so rarely found pure and untouched. Red. Its essence, I could only behold it in fleeting glimpses. It always vanished before I could really appreciate that loveliness. Blossoms wilted, makeup faded, and the garments of passers-by were never the right shade. I hungered for something deeper, richer than those glimpses of beauty. It was then that something occurred to me. The color of fire, of passion, of anger, of pain. It was also the color blood. Once that idea took hold of me, you can be sure it did not relinquish its hold easily. Blood was everywhere, whole rivers of it pulsing through the veins of billions of people around me. I had enough to paint the whole bleak, dull world red. I started my first a year ago, I believe. I remember thinking her skin would make a wonderful canvas, smooth and pale, and it did. Skin is so boring, so neutral and flat. So I took her to a narrow, winding street that led to a dead end, offering to walk her home as it had gotten very late. And I reached into my pocket and closed my trembling fingers around the handle of the blade I had sharpened earlier. I painted her red that night, she and I both. I felt a strange rush of something akin to euphoria, dragging the sharp, gleaming steel across the soft white surface and watched it come alive with red. I drew back and cut again and again, in long, sweeping curves, back, torso, shoulders, hips, stomach, wrists, thighs. It was even better than I'd imagined. Rich, flowing crimson poured out of every gash I'd made and splashed onto my hands, my knife, my clothes, the street. No one heard her screams, just as no one heard my delighted laughter as I sliced open her neck in one clean movement. Watched as the last lovely red poured out, warming and gushing into the street. Into the dark, deserted street as the last spark of light in her eyes went out. I stayed for a while with her still warm corpse in my arms, relishing the fresh, glistening color and smiling gently. I knew then that I would do this again, without the slightest hint of remorse. She had been just like everyone else, plain and unnoticed. I'd made her beautiful. I had painted her red. Every inch, the purest, brightest red I could find. It was a bit messy, but that was really to be expected for the first time. The next one would be a work of art. I don't understand. They made me stop. I was completing my masterpiece. 2 children, perhaps brother and sister. I planned to carve rosebuds into their skin. I had gotten quite good at making various designs and patterns. But they put binds on me, and forced me into a flashing, wailing car, covering up my hard work with ugly patches of cotton, and asked me questions I did not understand. They called me awful things, a psychopath, a murderer, a lunatic. They took my knife away. I was only an artist. I tried to explain. My blade was my paintbrush, the world was my canvas, its people my ink. I made them beautiful in death. If only they would let me show them, let me cut them, they might see how lovely it was. But they did not. No one understood. They repeated themselves endlessly. Murder, homicide, mutilation, assault, kidnapping, killing. Ugly words, hateful words. They didn't listen. Did they want the world to be boring? to spend their lives in a monochromatic shadow of what I could have made it. Perhaps they did. They wouldn't answer my questions, would only throw more words at me. Senseless, awful words. I was not any of the things they called me. I was an artist. They were the cruel ones, calling me names and locking me away. But it's okay, even though I was kept out of reach, even though I was placed in this shiny white, unreasonably clean box they call a hospital, even though they won't let me see anyone else. It's okay, because I didn't need a knife to cut. I didn't need others to paint. I had gallons of red pulsing and flowing in my veins. I had my teeth, my nails as brushes. The walls of the hospital room, clean and stark, would make a perfect backdrop. It was only a pity that I wouldn't be able to enjoy my last piece of artwork, this last splash of red. Delighted you're savoring the nightmares thus far. The upcoming tale is not for the faint of heart, especially for the ladies standing solitary in the silence of night, presenting the last emergency call I took. I'm Nina Rodriguez. I'm a police officer, have been for a good 7 years. In my time in the force, I have seen some pretty fucked up shit, to say the least. Crazed druggies, abusive parents, and even a few calls for help from the suicides. But none of those could ever hope to compare to an emergency call I'd taken last month. I now abhor taking emergency calls, not because of the over-worried people calling about every little squeak in their house, the noise complaints, or even the occasional prank call, though those could get pretty annoying. No, the worst thing about taking an emergency call is knowing that I had to sit on the other side of a phone, and no matter how much I hoped or how fast a squad car could get there, had absolutely no power over the situation. The following is, unfortunately, this situation. The day was like any other, monotonous in its predictability. It was a Wednesday night, and the end of my shift was still a ways off. Don't get me wrong, I love being a police officer, but I didn't sign up to be a secretary. I sighed and flipped through the files on my desk, absent-mindedly scanning through the different reports from earlier that day. There was nothing of dire importance, no hit-and-runs, robberies, or violence. Life in the country didn't require as much police attention as, say, any of the major cities. My phone rang on the corner of my desk, waking me from my thoughts. 911, what's your emergency? I said in a monochrome tone. Please, I need your help. A small, feminine voice answered. I leaned forward. Yes, what's the emergency, ma'am? I repeated, preparing my pen and pad. There's someone outside my house. He's just standing there, she answered, sounding frightened. This was not an entirely unusual situation. There have been several different cases filed for crazed stalkers. Now stay calm, everything's going to be all right, I said in my most convincing and gentle voice. I then continued with the standard questions. And how long has he been there, ma'am? I don't know. I just looked out the window a while ago and he was just standing there. He just appeared there a little while after it got dark. That was about an hour ago, and he hasn't moved an inch or ever stopped looking at me. I stopped writing. This was getting a little strange. A person just standing in one place, never moving or even looking away. Whoever this was, I had a feeling that they could be very dangerous. Okay, ma'am, we'll send an officer. What's your name and street address? Elizabeth Treville, 1465 Wellington Road. With a hum, I wrote down the address and gave it to an officer on standby, and he went on his way there. Okay, ma'am, we're sending a cruiser now. I could hear an audible sigh of relief. In the meantime, I began. Can you try to describe the man to me? Do you know him? I asked. Identifying the perp and making sure she was safe were the most important things at this time. Well, I definitely don't know him, or anyone with that body type. He's tall, very tall, pale and skinny, almost emaciated looking, and he's naked, I think. But I think he's too far to tell. Okay, can you see his face? Describe it for me? No, it's too dark to see his face, and I don't know how to describe it, but I know he's definitely looking at me, has been the whole time he's been here. Are all your doors locked? I asked. I think my back door's still unlocked. I'll go lock it real quick. Okay, I'll stay online. I heard her walk around, and the familiar, resonant click of a deadbolt lock could be heard. Okay, I am back. Now everything's locked and he's… She trailed off. What is it, Mom? I asked. Mom? I grew more and more uncomfortable in the silence. The quiet seemed to last forever until she spoke again in a more hushed tone than before. He's closer now. Before he was just at the edge of my woods, tens of yards away, but now he's only half that. It's important that you stay calm. Now, can you see any of his features now that he's closer? Yeah, it's weird. He is naked, but I cannot see any genitals or hair or, well, any defining features. It's like he's wearing some skin-tight suit. I still cannot really see his face, but I can tell it's deformed in some way. He's still staring at me. It's so unnerving. Okay, Mom, I need you to find a safe place to lock yourself in case anything goes wrong, I said as calmly as possible, trying not to scare her any farther. Yeah, okay. My bedroom door has a lock, and so does my bathroom. She trailed off once more, and I could hear a small whimper. Mom, is everything all right? He's closer. Her voice was so quiet that if I was not listening so intently, I could have missed it. Ma'am? I asked again. He's so much closer. I just absent-mindedly looked at my bathroom for a second, and then he cleared the almost 30 yards from where he was to the house. But at least now I can make out his… Oh, God. Ma'am? My voice came out in a small peep. I was on the edge of my chair. Oh, God, his face. I can see his face. It's pressed up against the window. It's awful. His eyes are so large, like black pool balls bulging out of his head. And he has this smile that goes from ear to ear, or where his ears should be. She let out with a sob. I needed to stop her from getting hysterical over whatever it was on the other side of her window. Ma'am, you are going to need to go to that safe place now, I said, regaining my commanding voice. No reply. Ma'am? Ma? I was interrupted. Help me! Her voice begged through the speaker of the phone and was soon followed by the sound of breaking glass. The phone clattered onto the floor with the clack of hollow plastic. She let out a loud shriek. She said various pleas, begging to be let go, but to no avail. Her screams trailed away, sounding more and more far off, until I could not hear her anymore. Nothing but silence followed, and time seemed to slow to a crawl. I did not know how long I sat there waiting for something. Anything. I also did not realize how tightly I was holding into the phone, not until I heard the sirens of a police car and hung up. That was the squad car that I had sent out not 15 minutes ago. Still with us. Excellent. The tale I'm about to unfold will unsettle even the sturdiest of souls. It's a narrative that will crawl beneath your skin and make itself at home. Without further ado, presenting There's a Body on My Sofa. Long black hair draped down in twisted, wet tendrils, her head cocked to one side as the TV blared in front of her. Hey! I shouted again, trying to project my voice over the noise. Hello! Her head didn't move, not so much as an inch, just stayed utterly stagnant, facing away from me, her body sitting upright on my couch. Hello! I again cried, slowly setting down my keys in the entryway, yet keeping my shoes on as I began creeping forwards hesitantly. Who are you? The TV was so loud it vibrated the room, thundering the floor as it flashed whatever infomercial was playing on it. My advance into the room slowed to a crawl as my heart began to hammer. Someone had broken into my house in the middle of the day. Someone was sitting in my living room as if it was their own. But that wasn't what caused my blood to grow sluggish and cold. Something else wasn't right. I could only see the back of her head. But it was enough. Her sickly hair was wispy, greying and mangled, so rotted it looked like it might fall out at any second. Even though tilted at an awkward angle, her head didn't so much as waver an inch as I shouted one more time. As I began rounding the couch, I could see her hands perfectly on her legs, rigid fingers forcefully pressed against her knees as her body stared straight ahead. My pulse pounded in my ears, nearly drowning out the TV as I half expected the gangly form to jump up and attack me as soon as I stepped in front into its gaze. What actually happened was so much worse. The dead eyes stared ahead like piercing knives, eyelids stretched open unnaturally wide. A horrific smile starched into its ghastly face as the lifeless corpse watched the TV like a doll. I staggered back, stealing a glance further into my house in panic, nearly fainting on the spot. The corpse didn't move an inch. It looked as if it had been stuffed, rotting flesh embalmed and stretched over a wire frame. Its neck was slit to the bone, but there was no blood visible anywhere in the wound, the only blood long since having dried into the dull clothes, like brown rust. I gagged on air, quickly turning off the TV, unable or unwilling to tear my eyes from the corpse. One of her hands, I now realized, was gripping the remote on top of her leg, the device crudely jammed between her stiff fingers. Turning off the TV made it so much worse. Silence instantly consumed the room, leaving just this horrible body to stare forwards at me, the only breathing my own. I grabbed my phone off its base in the corner of the room, still not allowing my eyes to leave the figure for more than 2-second intervals as I called the police. 911, what's your emergency? The operator spoke, the phone's plastic hot against my face. There is a body in my house, I coughed into the device, my hammering heart trying to lurch into my throat to stop the words from coming out. The killer may still be inside. I don't know. I'm at 8897 Surrey Drive, Littleton, Colorado. Her throat was slit and I don't know what to do. All right, sir. Please stay on the line, the operator continued. If you believe the killer is still inside, you should exit immediately and wait outside for help to arrive. We're sending help now. The police will be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes? I coughed. That's... Okay, I'll go and... The TV turned back on. I nearly dropped the phone, my hand flailing with the device in horror as I flinched. My gaze flashed back to the corpse on the couch, seeing its hand still motionless atop the remote. Its eyes remained frozen in a ghastly stare, corneas already decayed to an extent, pinprick pupils piercing through the rust. Its severed neck bent its head like a broken mannequin, its limbs horrifically stiff and rigid. The smile was enough to make vomit slosh into my throat, so genuinely appalling and out of place that the decaying teeth remained in my vision even when I blinked. Some of its hair was already lying in clumps around it, having fallen off like dead leaves. I could smell traces of decomposition, vomit and feces mixing into the heavy air that seemed to drip with decay. I slapped the TV off again, feeling my skin crawl with ice as I suddenly realized I was utterly trapped. To get out of my house now, I would have to cross into its stare again. I stammered like a child into the phone. I don't think I can wait. I don't think I can get out. I can't. I'm not sure. If she's dead. Did you check for a pulse? The operator spoke. Is she at all responsive? No, I gagged, seeing how its bare feet lay perfectly planted on the ground. I didn't check. I don't want to go near it. That's okay, the operator soothed. Why can't you get out? I don't know, I coughed, starting to feel tears build in my eyes as my limbs began shaking. It's staring straight ahead. I couldn't blink anymore. I was certain that if I looked away for even a second, closed my eyes or let them wander, when I looked back to the corpse, its head would be turned towards me. Horrible smile widened even further. It's okay, the operator spoke. The police are en route, but it is imperative that you get outside if you have reason to believe your life is in danger. Okay, all right, I breathed. Just keep talking, please. I began inching to my left, my back to the TV. The operator's voice continued talking, but was reduced to a low, haunted drone as blood rushed past my ears, and I inched closer and closer, towards the corpse's stare. My eyes were watering from a combination of being held open and an overpowering primal fear I couldn't comprehend nor suppress. The bulging, grisly eyes were staring directly at me now, the dead skin of her face stretched so tight it might tear off at any moment. My heart was slamming against the confining ribs of my chest, adrenaline making my hands shake. Who had been able to break into my house and put a body here? Who would even think to do that? And in such an unnervingly lifelike position. The TV flicked on. I ran. I didn't care if I was overreacting. I didn't even care if I was imagining the TV shrieking to life. The most surreal, raw fear had seized my muscles in a vice grip, and I instantly tore my eyes from the corpse, sprinting around the couch and tearing into the entryway without looking back. I grabbed my keys in a sloppy flail and wrenched my front door open, slamming it behind me seconds later. I jabbed my keys into the door, locked it, and scrambled out onto the street. My lungs were flattened and weak, my free hand clutching at my heart as the operator spoke out, clearly having heard the commotion. "Are you all right?" he asked. "What happened? Police will be with you in 5 minutes." I'm fine," I wheezed into the phone, now simply keeping watch on my front door. "I'm outside. I couldn't help but let out a strangled chuckle, waves of relief crushing the sounds out of me. "I'm fine," I again breathed. The police showed up only a minute later. My earlier panic likely sped things up a bit. I had done nothing but stare at the front door, and only when I heard the sounds of car doors opening and closing behind me did I finally release my stare and turn to the approaching officers. They called out, asking if I still thought the killer was inside, and I responded that I didn't know. The 4 men walked towards me, faster now, 2 with guns drawn as they circled around to the back of my house. "Back door unlocked?" one of the officers spoke. I thought for a moment before quickly nodding. "Front?" he continued, nodding to his partner as they drew their own guns. No," I stammered, quickly offering them my key. He nodded and grasped it, quickly tossing it to his partner and beginning to approach the house. "Stay outside," he affirmed. "If you hear gunshots, get as far away as possible." I hastily nodded, watching the 2 of them scramble to opposite sides of the front door. One of them quickly put the key into the lock and turned it before tossing it aside and placing his hand on the handle, giving a silent countdown to his partner. 3, 2, 1. He wrenched the door open, partially. The wood shuttered with a hard impact, bouncing back and nearly closing again. "All clear." Voices rang out from inside the house. No one but the cadaver inside, confirmed dead. The officer tried the front door again, forcing the door against the obstacle. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," one of the inside officers yelled. "Stop, Johnson. You've got the cadaver leaned against your door." You've endured the shadows and whispers, but will you survive the final encounter? Presenting Night Nurse. "Welcome to Riverwood," the administrator exclaimed, shaking the hand of the new night nurse. Riverwood was the town's only nursing home. It had been built as a hospital back in the early days of Millville. It was a grand 3-story building, built in an L shape. At the far west end of the building was a bell tower. It no longer sounded, the bell having been removed several years ago. It was on a slight hill overlooking the north end of town, and was surrounded by trees so thick that it was rumored that those who tried to escape or walk away got lost and were never found. Riverwood had been the place to take the aged and weary, or the sick and hopeless for many years now. It was the place that many waited for their final breath. It was said that in the beginning of Riverwood, many bad experiments had taken place here. It was also said that many of them went wrong, very wrong. But those days had passed, and after several remodels and updates to the building and systems, Riverwood had become a modern, simple living center for those who needed constant care. "Thank you, sir," the young nurse said politely, pulling her hand back to herself. "I hope I can work here a long time." "You will be working 3rd shift starting this Friday on the 3rd floor West Hall. Your assistant that night will be a young lady named Emily. She can give you the tour when you get here," said the administrator. "Thank you again." The nurse said as they both rose from their seats, and he walked her to the door. Once outside, she looked up at the building from the parking lot. "It's beautiful," she said to herself, "but it is a bit creepy." The place did seem to carry a bit of spookiness about it, but she was just relieved to have a job. These were hard times, and she needed money, especially if she still planned on getting married in the spring. She had tried several nursing homes in other surrounding towns, but she didn't have any luck until she applied here. She gave one last look at the building before climbing into her station wagon and drove down the drive. She couldn't wait to tell her fiancé. "Hi," a voice came from behind her as she rounded the last flight of stairs to the 3rd floor. "You must be Nancy, the new night nurse." It was from a young girl, maybe a few years younger than herself. "My name is Emily," the girl said. "I'm your assistant. I'm taking classes to be a nurse, so until I pass my exams, I can only help." They walked the rest of the way together. Emily showed her the 3rd floor layout, where the restroom was and of course the staff room. But since they worked 3rd shift, they would take their meals at their desk. They would be the only people on the entire West Hall. The 3rd floor West Hall was basically the hall where the extremely sick went. Each room was a sick room, and the smell that came down the hall was enough to make anyone gag, even if your stomach was made from granite. Emily's job was to basically keep the rooms clean from any messes that occurred from the patient, as well as attend to their basic needs, water, baths, feeding, etc. Nancy's job was to keep their medications going and deal with any major decisions that needed made. Within her first week, 2 of her patients had passed away and a 3rd had been on the verge of death, but she and the 3rd floor North Hall nurse had resuscitated the lady. The lady had cried the rest of the night, saying that it had been her time, the bell had told her so, and now they would be angry. Nancy was baffled at the lady and had ended up giving her something to put her to sleep, just so that she would rest. One night, while taking a break at the desk, call lights, the lights outside a patient's door that are used to alert the nurse when attention is needed, began going off in vacant rooms. Upon inspection by both Nancy and Emily, the switches hadn't even been flipped. It was then that Emily spoke up. "If you think this is weird, just wait. You're still new here. Night shift is when this place really stretches its legs." "What do you mean?" asked Nancy. "Well, think about it. When you work at a place like this, that has the history this one has, and the fact that most people who come in here don't leave here alive, you're bound to have some spooks." "Well, there are plenty of them here," Emily said as they walked back to the nurse's desk. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't mean to scare you. You'll get used to it." They talked away the rest of the night, neither leaving the side of the other. Emily had explained Riverwood's history to Nancy, and though at many points it left her uneasy about her new job, she realized she needed to keep it, and a few spooks wouldn't make her quit. So she kept at it, night after night. And even though there were always a few strange things that happened, Nancy was getting used to the place. But it was that winter that had created more of a problem for her. The snow was so thick in town that she couldn't have imagined how bad it would be heading out to Riverwood. Nancy and her boyfriend lived a few miles away from Millville, in the small college community of Crestwood. She didn't have to drive clear across the county to get to work, but the snow made her choose to take the highway. Her car had almost slid off the road at least 3 times before she made it. When she had arrived that night to work, half of the normal night staff, which was minimal anyway, wasn't there yet. The radio that was playing was talking about the weather and how it was the worst snowstorm they had had in years. Blizzard was what they were saying. Nancy believed it. The snow was already almost waist deep. She was surprised that she had been able to make it in her station wagon. It was almost like something wanted her to be here. "Okay, here's the plan." The charge nurse had walked over to her, making her rounds. "We're all probably going to be stuck here for a while, so you might call home if you need to inform anyone before the phones go out. If the lights go out, the generator should stay on long enough for us to all meet in the staff room. If that happens, I'll give further plans then. Find the flashlights for your hall." She had started to walk away when Nancy stopped her. "What about Emily? Is she here yet?" "No, you'll have to go it alone for a while. I'll try to get someone to come help you as soon as they can. If you need someone before that, just page me." With that, she disappeared beyond the doors. Nancy looked around her at the nurse's station and tried to sum up in her head all that needed to be done, since she would be doing 2 jobs at once. Then, after finding the flashlights, she placed one on her cart and headed down the dimly lit hallway. Everything had gone all right through her pill pass, except for the occasional flicker from the lights. A few times she had glanced out the windows to see how bad it was outside, but she couldn't really see past the window panes. It was a real whiteout out there. Walking back down the hallway, the lights flickered a few more times and then went out with a buzzing sound. She stopped for a minute, where she was standing, waiting for the generator to kick in. When she began to think that it wasn't, she started to walk slowly to where she thought she had put her cart. A feeling came over her that made her stop again. She felt as though someone else was there with her in that hallway. "Maybe it's the patients," she thought. "They're wondering what happened." "Go back to your rooms," she said. "It's the storm. The power has gone out, and the generator will be kicking in shortly." Even though she was saying it, she wasn't sure she believed it. It should have already had the lights back on. Whoever she had been talking to in the hallway must have heard her and went back to their room, because she didn't feel their presence anymore. She did hear something, though. She could barely make it out in all the noise the storm was making outside, but she was sure she could hear a bell tolling. She started walking again, a little faster this time, trying to find her cart that had the flashlight on it. "I told them they could have you," a voice said eerily down the corridor. She stopped and looked around her in the darkness. She couldn't see anyone nor feel anyone. "Go back to your room," she said in a slightly quivering voice. "The lights will be on again in a minute." "You took me from them when they came for me, so they're coming for you now," the voice said. Nancy listened for a minute and realized that it was the old lady they had brought back to life. "Please go lie down and go to sleep," she pleaded. Tears were welling up in her eyes as she started to follow the wall down to the nurse's station. Each open doorway she passed made her heart skip. Then she heard it again, the tolling of a bell. She could feel a draft sweeping across her face as if someone had opened a window somewhere. The cold against her cheeks was like icy fingers on her skin. She only wished Emily was here with her. It would have made her feel a little better. She came to another open doorway and began to slink past when something in the darkness grabbed her and pulled her into it. They would never have heard her scream because the darkness had filled her lungs and had enveloped her. Moments later, the generator kicked in and the lights finally came back on. After the storm had ceased and plows had begun to make their way through ice and snow, a noise had alerted the other nurses that Nancy was missing. It was the ringing of the bell that no longer existed. Several of the nurses had made their way up to the bell tower to see what was going on, when they found her hanging from a rope. As the wind hit her dangling legs, her head hit the bell, making it ring and reverberate across the hills. They said they heard a high-pitched laugh as the air around them became like ice-cold fingers. You've lingered in the shadows and emerged unscathed, a rare feat. If the darkness whispered to you and you found solace in its tales, crush that like button. It's your seal of survival. Subscribe for more weekly videos and join the ranks of those who've stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. Until we meet again, remember, the night is always watching.